Um, we're going for a colorful ride this time. Nick Cave is a remarkable artist. He was born in 1959. He's a sculptor, dancer, performance artist, and professor at the Chicago Art Institute. He actually is the director of the fashion department. He studied at the Art Institute of Kansas City Art Institute, and then he also studied dance during the summers with the Alvin Ailey Dance Company in New York. When he graduated from Kansas City, he took a job as a fashion designer and a display designer at Macy's, and then went back to Cranbrook Academy, got his master's, and also took courses, advanced courses at the University of North Texas in fabric, fiber arts, that's what they call it. So the guy's a fascinating character. His work really engages the communities that he works with. So he's really a multidisciplinary artist, though he is primarily a sculptor. Oh, by the way, Joan didn't say it, but I'll say it again. If you have any questions, put it in the chat. And if it's directly relevant to what I'm talking about while I'm going through this, Joan will pipe in and feed me the question. So he actually is having this retrospective, which is at the Guggenheim. Now that is primarily of his sculpture, wall hung pieces, and a bunch of what he calls his sound suits. So now we're going to move on to that. Let me see. Okay. The origins of Cave sound suits comes from the social tragedy that is still hauntingly relevant, the brutality witnessed during the Rodney King beatings. And what happened was he was really profoundly affected by that. Now, let me do a little bit more background on him. He's comes from a working class background. He had 7 brothers. They were basically had a single parent. His mother raised the family. So what ended up happening, and one of the things that got him into fashion and all of that, is basically all of his clothes were hand-me-downs from his older brothers. So he would do things to the clothing, sewing it, changing it, altering it in some way. So he was into this creating costumes from when he was a child. He also, during the summers, would work at his grandparents' farm. So he was exposed to, raising chickens and farm implements and a lot of kind of used and well-worn tools and things like that. So you'll see later on how that plays into his assemblage work. So I started thinking about myself, and more as a Black man, as someone who was discarded, devalued, viewed as less than. I started thinking about the role of identity, being racially profiled, feeling devalued, less than, dismissed. I happened to be in the park one day, and he's looking around, he's looking at the ground, and he sees these twigs and starts to gather twigs. And he wasn't sure what he was going to do with them, but they somehow seemed, you know, they were discarded, they were insignificant, they were, rather, ubiquitous, they're everywhere, but nobody pays attention to them. So he gathers all these twigs together, brings them back to his studio, and this was his first sound suit. Okay. Now, why is it called a sound suit? Well, he was building a sculpture. And by the time he was finished building the sculpture, he realized that he could get inside that sound suit. And that's what he did. He wore it. And as he started to move around in it, he realized that it made all these sounds from all the clicking of the twigs. So that's where the sound suit, the origin of the sound suit comes from with him. I don't ever see sound suits as fun. They're really coming from a very dark place. And this sound suit was from 2012, but you can see how he's carrying that forward. So the Guggenheim installation, for the most part, is a very static installation. You don't see a whole lot of action in these suits. You will see later in my presentation how important that is to understanding his work and what it's really about. There's a whole other dimension to this work, other than it being these glorious, wacky, wonderful pieces. There's a very performative aspect, and the socio-political kind of anthropological quality to the work. When you see it in this state, like the lawn jockey facing the bear in the woods here on the right, there's a removal from the context and reorganization of these objects in a situation that becomes very different from what the cumulative things are. I mean, there's birds, there's leaves, there's all, plastic flowers. The whole bit is all gathered from flea markets and junk stores, and he assembles this stuff and finds things in antique malls and things like that. He and his partner are known to buy one-way tickets, like to Seattle or someplace out in Tacoma, Washington, or something like that. Rent a cargo van and drive their way back from Washington State to Chicago, and along the way stop at all these antique malls and flea markets and things like that, and just pick up stuff that he's going to use as material. And he said, I always, I have a sense when something's got something to it for me. So okay, and these are some pieces that are I think some of these pieces are in this Guggenheim show. You can see it's really powerful work. The unarmed black man. Okay. uh, the piece that's on the wall is really fascinating. I mean, basically, he found this table in this in this flea market, cut the thing in half, it becomes a shelf, cut the legs off of a chair, and it becomes the bars for this cell. It's powerful work, and the sculptures in the show have a real resonant and dark quality to them. Cave primarily works with found objects, existing materials, making something from nothing. So you can see these really wacky pieces. I mean, they're dolls, they're dollar store things. They're he just finds all this stuff and puts it together. At this point, he's got a kind of a big factory building, I believe, in the north side of Chicago, and he's got students and apprentices to help him put these things together. But the other thing that I wanted to say about these things is they have a reliquary quality. When you're in Italy, you find these little shrines on the street and things like that. So there is that kind of preciousness to these strange, cheap objects that are assembled together. Okay, and again, he studied with Alvin Ailey, and that was a profound effect on him. He went back and studied during the summers while he was in school at Kansas City. And actually, again, when he went to Cranbrook Academy, I think he continued to study dance. So these are some of the sound suits, and this is a detail from a piece called Herd, and these are wonderful raffia horses that he put together, and there's actually two dancers that are inside these things. There's one for the rear end and one for the front end, and although I can explain to you what these are all about, they're made out of raffia, and they're gorgeous when they move. They're very lyrical and beautiful color. And the only way I can explain it is by showing you a clip. So I have a 13-minute clip here. We're going to go here at this point. Hopefully this works. We'll see.
How do we keep dreaming? How do we sort of keep imagining what our life could be? How does those thoughts and those ideas become part of our reality? Prior to the first sound suit, I was really sort of doing large construction sort of paintings. It was not until 1992 when the LA riots, the Rodney King incident happened, that really turned my whole way of thinking about art. For me, it was my only sort of savior. It was a place that I could go to and work out all of these sort of frustrations and these sort of angers. And so the first sound suit was in response to that. It sort of hid gender, race, class. So you were forced to look at something without judgment. Then I started to think about the role of protest. In order to be heard, you've got to speak louder. So it just started to unfold and really answer all my questions.
The performance is an artwork in and of itself, but the process is just as important to the project as the actual performance is. And so it starts off the first day with these rehearsals where we're just doing improvisation across the floor, and Will takes them through a series of movements, some that are a bit more regal or front-facing, and others that are a little bit more butt-facing. And we see who actually activates those most authentically and most animated. And so you very quickly determine who's a front and who's a back.
First thing that I normally do when I meet new dancers is to silently I assess the situation. Like, because I've worked in dance so much, body language says a lot. You can tell who's all on board. And if the intent is right, even the mistakes will be beautiful. When the vibe is right and when the cohesiveness and continuity is right, you feel it. And I call it the truth. Isn't that the beauty of art? It's so wonderful, and it's like the truth being told. You can tell when someone is lying in any idiom that they do, whatever they do, you can tell. The vision is always clear. And it starts with Nick, because it's his creations, it's his vision, and he specifically tells us what he wants, and he'll let you know when it's not right, and not in a disrespectful way. It's just very clear about his vision. And so we just help him manifest it.
Art is so much about communities coming together, but individuals, strong individuals that make a community coming together, and kind of the power that a community has. These dancers are paired up as a horse, so two individuals as a horse. And they're given the permission as well as encouraged to work together to decide what kind of horse they really want to be. Rainbow's a very special horse. He's kind of he represents the whole project in a way, this kind of peaceful power, right? He's the one that is really all about unity and inclusion and joy and the power of all of that.
We're interested in this whole idea of sort of reintroducing a city back to itself, and for these dancers to sort of make these sort of connections, to know that you have this sort of collective sort of amazing performers in the city, and how can you sort of continue to find ways to sort of work together.
We very strongly felt the role of caretaker for their work.
It's been magical for us, and I think it will be incredible for the audience to witness as well.
As soon as you put another audience in the room, it's like music. When you play music in a room with no one in it, sound sort of bounces off the walls. And then when you get people in the room, you can really feed off everyone's energy. So what you give out to them, they can give back to you, and it's just a continuous circle.
I think the project's beautiful. Nick's work is quite subliminal, but quite antagonistic in a way as well, that it has a political message behind it that might not be so apparent when you just touch the surface, but scratch a little deeper and there's a lot more meaning behind it.
Imagination is free, fantasy is, no one can cage or contain that.
It's important to sort of present something to an audience that is transformed in this sort of moment of us sort of collectively coming together. When that moment where the back end separates from the front, where everything is exposed. The fact that, nothing's hidden, that it's all sort of just, literally just put out there, and yet there's still this amazing element of conviction that is beautiful. You know, we never stop sort of dreaming. Dreaming is optimism. It's really sort of like keeps me very alive and always sort of open to possibilities as the world continues to sort of reshape itself.
Well,
Okay, Larry, we have some comment.
yes.
Years ago, I saw one of these performances in Vanderbilt Hall of, wait a minute, I lost it. In Vanderbilt Hall of Grand Central
Yes.
Station. It was amazing.
As a matter of fact, I have a copy of some of that, which I will show you in a little while.
Oh.
So
Excellent.
actually the context of where the performance piece is done has a powerful effect on how you see them and how they come across. The audience participation is really important. So yeah. Good. I'm really glad that somebody saw that. I am jealous.
Me too.
So you see these fabulous pieces. I mean, and now you have some more of a sense of what these things are. The kinetic energy that comes out of these pieces, really dynamic. And you put a dancer inside it, inhabiting these things and moving with it. It's really incredible. I know, you know, if I were in my 20s and got one of these things on, I'd go nuts. Okay, so one of the things I wanted to go into at this point is basically how do these things equate to that anguish that Cave was talking about, that sense of pain in watching these terrible things that have happened, Trayvon Martin, George Floyd. How does this equate to that? And what's the energy in this? And one of the things that I immediately thought of is Mardi Gras and this reverent and yet celebratory aspect, this kind of orgiastic element that comes before the sense of loss, of transformation, of Carnival is really about a ritual practice. It's a life-affirming ritual practice that happens in communities. And this is, I think, where it hooks in for Cave. And I went out and researched and, you know, went to the Mardi Gras, but then I looked around for Carnival in Africa, in you know, of course, Brazil, and in the East, you know, looking at these camels and you know, just think about those horses we just saw, and then in again in Nigeria, these elephant pieces in the center. So you see that there's a context that he traveled, he went to Africa, he went to, you know, he knew New Orleans, of course, and all of that. So I think Cave pulls that in, this ritual practice comes into the work. So here's Nick Cave standing in front of one of the mosaics that he did for the MTA. And basically they, he designed this and they installed it. This is in, I believe, the Times Square. I haven't seen it in person. I think they started installing it in 2018 or something like that. And here's a bigger shot of the piece. And here again is another section. The repetition of pattern, the rhythmic use of the linear element in this piece reminds me a bit of Keith Haring, of that kind of big shape business, but just fantastic. I want to go into the subway just to see this piece. Nowadays, going into the subway is taking a risk. I understand, but I think it might be worth it. Okay, let me move on here. Okay. So again, back to this kind of static sculpture. It serves a very different function, drawing attention to the pain of this kind of social inequity. Cave said, when he was a child, his mother sat the 7 brothers down and had the talk. And so, these pieces are really profound at this time. They're really speaking to a social ill that has become very apparent to most of us at this point.
Larry?
Yes.
The person who saw the Grand Central also said she's seen them too, and they were beautiful, worth going to the subway.
Oh, so, good. That's great.
She was lucky. Boy, was she lucky.
Yes. Well, the subway thing is installed. We can all go see it. So that's still there. So one of the things I wanted to step back into is Ansel Kiefer, who is a very well-known, one of the top German artists in the world today. Did this piece in 2015 as part of a retrospective. He is known to do these installation pieces that are really echo the Holocaust, and there's that, again, that set design, that sense of monumentality, and the power of being in a piece like this. So Nick Cave was commissioned to do a show at Mass MoCA, and he was given one of the biggest halls that they have in that factory complex to do this installation. And again, it's dime store stuff. It's spinners. These are things that were mass produced and all over the place. One of the things that he also addresses is this idea of consumerism, of the ubiquitousness of stuff in our society, and kind of uses it as part of the material. By the same token, what he did, if you see the piece that's on top, which is a close-up of one section, he created a bunch of the spinners with guns in them. And he also created a bunch of them as teardrops. So mixed in with all these buoyant, frivolous spinners are these teardrops and guns spinning. Really interesting piece. And you can see below, how large this piece is. Now, another section of this piece, of this installation, is this. And what you're doing is you're looking up from underneath at this cloud-like chandelier, and it's, you know, very uh, kind of grandiose and amorphous. It kind of billows into the space. Above it is all this stuff. Okay, you have another lawn jockey who's carrying a tennis racket. There's birds and fish and pigs and you know, farm implements and all kinds of crazy stuff mixed in there, picked up from here and there and everywhere. Again, didn't see this piece, wish I did. Looks really fascinating. Um, you know, I mean, the spinners are a little grand mal. There is that aspect to it. It's a little overwhelming to be inside something like that, but would be fascinating to see. And okay, more of the sound suits. It's kind of lost in this wilderness. And you can see, you know, the birds, this collection of stuff that he gathered in one of his antiquing journeys out into the countryside. Fascinating, colorful. You know, it'd be really interesting. I haven't seen one of these in motion, but it would be fascinating to see what these are like on a person and moving. Okay, and here's the man himself. And again, he has his own fashion line, so he's still designing clothes for men. And designing sound suits for his performers. And as I said, these take on a very different kind of totem-like quality in a museum setting where they're still and they're not in action and not interacting. Okay, this is another clip, and I'll speed us through it, but it's worth taking a look at it because this is a very different one. This was on the UCLA campus, so let's see what we can get out of this. Again, you're not hearing sound, correct, Joan?
Right, we don't hear any sound.
Okay. Okay. Well, there's a sound of children squealing in the background right now because there's an audience for this piece. And there's these bird-like creatures, and they start to make some bird-like sounds as they squeak their way down the stairs. Then they interact with the kids. So what he does is he'll come in and do a workshop with a dance company, and you know, bring in people that are maybe dancers or maybe not dancers, but people that get the movement and get the idea of how to play inside one of these costumes. Okay. All right. So one of the other things is he did go to Africa, and he saw these you know, ceremonial outfits, these costumes that were traditionally worn during festivities, during the actual ceremonies. And I think that, you know, there's a parallel that happens in that for him. This is a wall relief piece that he did, but you know, I mean, there's the interesting part about the wall relief is, you know, there's these things like the phonograph speakers that are kind of flower-like that he integrates. He loves those things. He dug up a lot of them over time. There's a lot of intricacy to this. I don't know how well I can do this, but I'm going to try and zoom in and see if we can pick up some of the stuff that's in there, the birds and the crazy little things that are mixed into these pieces. The beads, a lot of the Mardi Gras beads. Fun, colorful, crazy stuff. Okay. The other context that I want to put him in is performance artists and installation artists. So Meredith Monk is one who actually I saw this piece back in 1976. This piece is a strange, beautiful thing, a mixture of music and dance and theater, some film projection and stuff like that. And basically it's a full length, what she called an opera. She uses these sounds, none of them, there's no libretto that is humanly discernible, but sound chorales that she uses. And the piece is really referential to the Holocaust. Again, her parents, her relatives were all people that came out of Europe and escaped. Some did not. So, you know, that kind of social consciousness is something which is in performance art and part that has been since the 50s, really. And then below, I put in a couple of pieces from Fred Wilson. Fred Wilson actually, well, I consider to be a friend. He was a classmate of mine back in at Purchase. Very charming human being. But what Fred did was I'll preface this with saying he is now like blue chip artist. He's one of the trustees with the Whitney Museum. He received the MacArthur Award in 1999, MacArthur Genius Award. So what he did was he started working in museums and began to take things from their collections and actually recontextualize them, like taking a whipping post and putting it out on display and taking a set of beautifully made antique chairs and facing them towards the whipping post as kind of the audience to this. Very powerful stuff. He would go through the collections and dig up things in those dark corners of you know, the museum and put them together in ways that were totally unexpected. Mine, yours is a piece that belongs to the Whitney, and you know, you see this photograph of the actual, you know, descendants of slaves, and these figurines, and then this business with Nefertiti going from white to black and the transition, and you know, this is taking these things and making these things of beauty something that we ask questions about. Ask ourselves about our social relationships and how we perceive our history. So it's fascinating stuff, and he's doing these giant black, really beautiful chandeliers at this point with black teardrops coming off of them. They're really incredible pieces. He's showing with pace now. We're not going to worry about how much money he's making, but the impact of the work is really powerful and relates to what Nick Cave is about. And these pieces are, again, you know, it's the junk store. You know, he found a bunch of hands and put them together, and you know, these black hands reaching up out of this table or bench or whatever it is, and the head with the planter. So you know, there's a context for this work. This is an older piece, and Time and Again is what this one's called. One of the artist's early assemblages, and if you look at it, there's farm tools in there. There's crucifixes. There's the wall piece itself looks to me like tombstones, and there's a kind of offering bowl aspect of these bowls that are laid out in front of the thing. So there's an ancestor worship aspect. So what I'm going to say is there's a wonderful documentary, and it's about an hour and 10 minutes long, well worth the watch. It's called As Is. And if you Google it, you'll come up with that one. And that was one that he did down in Shreveport, Louisiana, using local dancers and a gospel group, and it was like a month-long residency that he did down there. He had the community making beads, making these bead blankets, which actually were used in the final performance. So, you know, there's the gospel, there's folk music, there's dancers, there's a a street poet that he pushes and pushes to get him to get more and more profound imagery and deeper into the piece. Really wonderful, and as is well worth the visit. There's also a video from the Denver Art Museum from 2013. That one's longer. It's a couple of hours. There's a lot of performances in that one. One of the things about the documentary as is it shows the cultivation of the piece, never shows the finished performance, but the piece in and of itself, his community involvement, his interaction with people is quite remarkable and really well worth watching.
I just want to mention 2 people raised their hand.
Yes.
If they would just type it in the chat function. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I know we don't have sound, but I actually did record the one that took place in Grand Central, and I can play that for you. It's about 13 minutes long. If you guys need to bail out before it's done, that's fine, but I'll play it for you and you can watch it. Unfortunately, you won't be able to hear the harpist and the drummer who are accompanying the piece, but you'll get the idea out of it anyway. So I'm going to play this. There's people oohing and eyeing in the background. There's kids squealing. Think about the coordination between the 2 people that are occupying these horses. They're going to split apart in a few minutes. Unfortunately, you guys can't hear the conga, but you get the idea.
Larry, is there a way that we could find this videotape and hear it ourselves? Larry? Larry,
Yes.
you're losing people.
Really?
So
Yeah.
So I think you should, can you have a link how you found it and send it to others so we could find it?
Okay. So basically, if you want to get to this and hear the sound, just go to YouTube and do Nick Cave Herd performance at Grand Central,
Okay.
and you'll get there. So that about does it. Now they're just going to take the costumes off, so you'll get to see how they're put together. But that was the performance. Okay.
That performance was fabulous, but I think it would have been so much more exciting to hear it.
Yeah,
So, all right, so
you know,
so
it doesn't
YouTube?
add that much, Joan. It's just
Really?
conga. But yes, I think that they're definitely the sound and all of that is really terrific. As I said, those other as is a really wonderful piece that's out there, and that's definitely worth watching also. So,
All right, so
okay,
YouTube. What I'm just
That's
trying
it.
YouTube, Nick Cave, Sound
Yes.
Suits, Grand Central. Okay. All right, thank you all. I hope you will it was fabulous. This was so fabulous. I loved it.
he's really a wonderful human being.
Yeah. All right. It's just about over, right?
That's it. We're done.
Okay. All right, we'll see you again. What's the next one, Larry?
I don't remember right now.
Okay, no problem. All right. We'll see you all. Have a good weekend.
Yeah,
And stay
have a
warm.
great holiday.
And a great that's right, we won't see you again. Have a great holiday. Bye everyone.
Bye.